and subscribe.
Oral questions. Questions orales. L'honorable chef.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Unfortunately, Montreal and Quebec are not safe from the chaos that the Prime Minister caused in British Columbia when he legalized hard drugs. In fact, the Public Health Director of Montreal has suggested moving forward with that same legalization. Will the Prime Minister reverse course on his radical position when it comes to legalizing drugs? Or will he impose the same chaos in Montreal that he already imposed in British Columbia? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, let's take a moment here to reflect on what occurred yesterday. You had to censor the Leader of the Opposition because he refused to withdraw his unparliamentary language. He was engaging in political attacks about a huge human tragedy in British Columbia. Now, we, of course, take this tragedy seriously. We act with compassion. We act based on facts and evidence. We will support British Columbia as they transition and adjust their pilot project. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. So, does he rule out legalizing hard drugs in Montreal? Yes or no? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition knows full well that our government acts based on facts and teamwork with provinces. The province of British Columbia requested a pilot project. We're working with them. We studied it with them. We gave them the green light for their pilot project. We have not received such a request from any other provinces. If other provinces wanted to have a similar project, we would look at it and make a responsible decision based on the facts and based on precedent in other places.
Position.
Donc, il ouvre la porte.
Right. So he is opening the door to legalizing hard drugs in Montreal and perhaps in other cities in Quebec. We're against it.
The Minister legalized smoking meth in hospital rooms, shooting up heroin in parks next to children, using hard drugs on public transit. The British Columbia government has asked him to reverse this legalization for parks, hospitals, and transit. Will he? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the opioid epidemic is hitting families, communities, and individuals right across this country and has for many, many years. That's why we are continuing to use an approach grounded in compassion, in public safety and public health, and facts-based decisions. We responded to British Columbia government's asking for a pilot project. We will, yes, work with them to adjust it in ways that they see fit. It's important to make sure that BC continues to do the things that it needs to do to keep people safe in its jurisdiction.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He still refuses to answer the question on whether or not he will reverse himself. He made the decision to exempt hard drugs from the criminal law so that it became legal to smoke meth or crack in a hospital room, including around nurses who are breastfeeding their kids. This has caused chaos, and 6 British Columbians are dying every day that he delays. So will he announce that as of today, he's changed his mind and he's reversing his legalization of hard drugs in BC? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, a number of years ago, British Columbia approached us with a pilot project that they wanted to bring in to look at a different way of dealing with the ongoing public health crisis that was hitting British Columbia around the opioid epidemic. We worked with them as they developed this pilot project, and now that they are asking for modifications to that project, we are looking at those modifications, and we will work with BC as they seek to adjust their plans around public health and around dealing with this opioid epidemic.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, there is no time to waste. The BC government asked him to reverse his legalization of crack, heroin, and other hard drugs in public places on Friday. Every day, 6 British Columbians die of overdoses under this policy, and many more die as a result of drug-induced crimes. So there is no time for bureaucratic and political considerations. Will he announce now that his experiment with legalizing hard drugs in BC is over? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, you will understand if I take it with a little skepticism when the Leader of the Opposition says this is not about politics, because he has been the one that has been pointing out vulnerable people and trying to pursue ideological aims on this ongoing public health crisis. We have consistently stepped up to work with provinces, with municipalities, with jurisdictions, indeed, including by moving forward with British Columbia as they wanted to try a pilot project, that we are working with them to adjust in ways that make sense. We understand the urgency, and we will act.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The decision is on his desk to reverse the legalization of hard drugs in British Columbia. The BC government has admitted that it was wrong. They decided not to go ahead with the full 3-year pilot project that the Prime Minister brought in place by exempting hard drugs from criminal law. Will he do as the BC government has done, admit he was wrong today so we can start saving lives?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, from the beginning, we've been there to work on an evidence-based, science-based, compassionate public health approach to the opioid epidemic, and that included responding to BC's request for a pilot program. Now that they are asking to adjust this pilot program, we will work with them to adjust it in ways that make sense for them. But given the new, more reasonable tone of the Leader of the Opposition, I wonder if he might take this opportunity to reassure Canadians that he does not support extremist white nationalist organizations like Diagalon, nor wants their votes.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, that is false. And furthermore, there are 6 people dying every day in British Columbia. There is a 380% increase in overdose deaths in that province under this Prime Minister's legalization and subsidization of hard drugs. Enough trying to score political points over the issue. Do the right thing. It is on his desk. Will he announce today that he has changed his mind and reversed legalization of hard drugs? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. As I said, we're working with British Columbia to adjust their parameters and their desires around the pilot project. We will always be there to work in order to keep Canadians safe. At the same time, I will point out that the Leader of the Opposition refuses to say a simple thing, that he condemns Diagalon because they are a white nationalist violent organization, that he rejects the endorsement of Alex Jones, an extremist conspiracy theorist who denied the deaths of 20 kids at Sandy Hook. These are things that concern Canadians that he should also answer for.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, this is the Prime Minister who has to answer for the people who are dying every day due to his policies. And worse still, he's now considering decriminalizing hard drugs in Toronto. The City Hall has made a formal request for him to use powers under the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act to do in Canada's biggest city what he already did in British Columbia. Today, I wrote him a letter asking him to change his mind and reverse his position and make clear that he will not legalize hard drugs on buses and in hospitals in Toronto.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, we see fear-mongering going on by the Leader of the Opposition right now. I will recall for people that a number of years ago, the City of Vancouver approached us with a desire to decriminalize in their city, and we said, no, we would not do that for Vancouver. We work with provinces and public health systems. That is why we moved forward with British Columbia on a pilot project they wanted. In regards to any other province, whether it be Quebec or Ontario or anywhere else, we will work with the governments in place on proposals they may or may not have to deal with the opioid epidemic. That's all.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
You still won't clearly answer the question, Mr. Speaker, which is doubly concerning, because Toronto has been overtaken by crime and chaos since he brought in the catch and release policies under Bill C-75, C-5, and C-83. Violent crime is up 40%. We just heard the tragic story on Monday of a liquor store robber crashing into a family, tragically killing grandparents and a precious child. The assailant was out on bail. Will he repeal catch and release?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I believe if you or other parliamentarians or indeed Canadians look at the transcripts of these questions and answers, they will see that I actually did answer the questions the Leader of the Opposition posed to me in terms of how we were going to work with British Columbia and how we would work with any province that came forward with positions to try and help with the opioid epidemic, and we would examine those on their merits. But the Leader of the Opposition has not answered Canadians' concerns about why he will not condemn Diagalon, the far-right extremist organization, why he will not reject the endorsement of Alex Jones, noted conspiracy theory.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, he has not answered the question whether he would expand decriminalization elsewhere. He's using vague references to jurisdictions, but it's his jurisdiction alone to grant exemptions under the Controlled Drug and Substances Act. So, will he admit that his real plan is to take the decriminalization of hard drugs that he imposed on British Columbia and do that in all the provinces and territories across the country?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
No, Mr. Speaker. I think for 8 years, for almost 9 years now, Canadians have seen that our approach on the opioid epidemic is grounded in public safety, in public health, in compassion, in funding frontline workers, and doing things that work to save lives and help people. And it is not to have some sort of secret plan, as he proposes. But if he wants to talk about secret plans, he would probably do well to actually clear the air for Canadians about his seeking for support amongst members of extremist right-wing organizations like Diagalon.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, that is again false, but the government is now suddenly and only partially changing its message on decriminalization. Prime Minister's Minister of Addictions is out now saying she's waiting for more information from British Columbia on its request to recriminalize crack, heroin, meth, and other hard drugs in hospitals, transit, and parks. Mr. Speaker, there are 6 people dying every single day. What more information does he need?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, there are dozens of people dying every day in provinces right across this country from the opioid epidemic. We could talk about the challenges faced in Alberta. We could talk about the challenges faced in Ontario. We could talk about the challenges faced right across the country. And different provinces and jurisdictions have different approaches. Some work better, some haven't worked as well. We will continue to be there in a thoughtful, compassionate, rigorous, science-based way to work with jurisdictions on directions that work best for them and adjust those proposals and those responses as necessary. That's what a responsible government does.
In Canada's biggest city, gun crime is up 66%. It's 100% nationwide. I just shared the tragic story of someone out on bail slamming his car into an innocent family. 2 wonderful grandparents dead. A beautiful baby dead. He was out on bail under the Prime Minister's catch and release C-75. How many more will have to die before he repeals catch and release and brings jail, not bail, for repeat offenders?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I will highlight that we worked with provinces, including many provincial Conservative leaders across this country, to bring in bail reform. We'll continue to work on things that are keeping Canadians safe. At the same time, the leader opposite talked about gun crime. Well, we move forward with some of the strongest measures on gun control that this country has ever seen. A freeze on the purchase of handguns, a total ban on assault-style weapons that has been in place for 4 years. These are the kinds of things that the Conservative Party and its leader have consistently stood against, even as we move to make our communities even safer.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He mentioned all these guns that he claims to have banned and promised to seize 4 years and $40 million ago. How many has he seized?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, there are thousands of different types of assault-style weapons that for the past 4 years have been rendered illegal to sell, illegal to buy, and illegal to use, including at a gun range. Mr. Speaker, we are now working on a program to allow those owners to sell them back to the government for them to be destroyed and get money so they can go buy other guns or other products if they want to that will be legal. This is about fairness, even as we move to keep Canadians safe. Unfortunately, the Leader of the Opposition wants to make those assault weapons legal again.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
All those weapons are still legal, Mr. Speaker. You can still own them. The Prime Minister says he's going to seize them. He's going to buy them. He spent $40 million doing that. So I'm going to ask again, how many guns has he bought? Just the number.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as the Leader of the Opposition knows, we are in the process of establishing that buyback program. The priority was making sure that those guns were no longer available to buy, to sell, to bequeath, or to use, Mr. Speaker, and that has been the case for 4 years. Now, what the Leader of the Opposition is conveniently refusing to opine on is the fact that he has committed to the gun lobby across this country that he would reverse the 2020 OIC that banned those assault-style weapons. He wants to bring those assault-style weapons back, or he can contradict me right here.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I will contradict him because they're not banned right now. It's perfectly legal for people to possess those guns. They are easy to possess, and not one of them has been. The answer to the question is that he has not seized a single solitary one of them. He spent 40 million tax dollars that could have secured our ports and our borders, and he hasn't taken in a single solitary gun. Is that why gun crime has risen by 100% since he became Prime Minister 9 years ago?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I will note, as did everyone in this chamber, that the Leader of the Opposition did not deny that he will be reversing the ban on assault-style weapons. He doesn't even think it exists right now. Well, Mr. Speaker, it does exist right now. It is illegal to buy, sell, or use any of those weapons. When the amnesty ends next year, it will be illegal to own them as well. We're giving an opportunity for people to sell them back to the government. That is what we are doing to keep people safe. That is what he will not commit to keeping.
The Honourable Member from Nunavut.
Okaktitiyu in Nunavut, the Arctic Children and Youth Foundation administers the Inuit Child.
Speaker, the federal government is committed in promoting Canadian values such as inclusion, diversity, and acceptance. As elected members of this House, we are all responsible for our conduct in this chamber and outside of it. Yesterday, our government called out the Conservative leader for his behavior, for his courting of a far-right, white nationalist extremist group. Instead of standing up to apologize and distance himself from them, he has shockingly doubled down and threw a temper tantrum. Can the Prime Minister please tell this House what impacts the far extremism and its enablers have on vulnerable communities and Canadians?
Le très honorable.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
What we saw yesterday from that side was unbecoming of anyone who aspires to leadership. His refusal to denounce far-right nationalist extremism cannot and will not be overlooked by Canadians. Far-right extremism and its enablers pose real and dangerous threats to marginalized communities. This is not something as a country we can stand for, and on this side of the House, we never will. Unfortunately, that leader cannot say the same.
I'll get back to this at the end of the House, end of this question period, but I encourage all members to continue, aside perhaps from the last question, to continue in the positive vein, which I think Canadians have noticed that members have been taking today. The honourable member, the honourable leader of the opposition.
2 years ago, after having doubled the rent, doubled mortgage payments, and doubled the needed down payment for a home, the Prime Minister promised in his budget that he would double home building. Here we are, 2 years later, and home building is down 8%. His housing agency says it will be down next year and the year after that. If it cost him $89 billion in programs to bring home building down, how much would he have to spend to bring it up?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our housing plan is focused on fairness for every generation. We, over the coming years, will be unlocking 3.8 million new homes by cutting red tape, by rezoning, by lowering the costs of home building, by using public lands and vacant office buildings to build affordable housing for Canadians. We will be reviving the dream of home ownership for young Canadians by making it easier to save up for a tax-free down payment and giving renters credit for their monthly rent payments towards the ability to get a mortgage. We've put forward the most comprehensive, ambitious housing plan this country has ever seen.
The honourable leader of the opposition.
The only thing it doesn't do is build homes. Since he made the most recent promise in 2022 to double housing construction, the number of builds is actually down and expected to continue to drop next year and the year after that, according to his own housing agency. Yet, he says we should all be assured because once again, he's spending tens of billions of dollars on the problem that he created. So can you tell us, in what year will home building actually rise? Which year?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we know well that the federal government has an important role to play in ensuring housing starts across the country and ensuring the opportunities for Canadians to buy their first home, to move forward up the equity ladder. These are things that we know we have a role to play in. But we are not alone in that, Mr. Speaker, which is why we are challenging and encouraging municipalities and provinces to also step up with ambition in our national housing home building plan. This is why we're putting incentives on the table. We're putting investments in the pockets of municipalities, including with our Accelerator Fund. There is more to do, but we will be doing it in partnership.
The honourable leader of the opposition.
That's what he's been saying for 9 years. And the result has been double the rent, double the mortgage payment, double the down payment. And just this week, a survey showed that 72% of Canadians who don't own a home believe they never will. Canada was not like this before this Prime Minister, and surely it won't be like this after he's gone. The Prime Minister a comment on what it's like to be the only Prime Minister in history to deprive an entire generation of home ownership.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the government that was in place before I became Prime Minister had a housing minister who is now the leader of the opposition, in a government that explicitly said that the federal government had no role to play and no responsibility towards building affordable housing across this country. So for 10 years, there was very little, there was almost no federal involvement in building homes across this country. We turned that around starting in 2017, and we will continue to invest, to create opportunities, to create fairness for millennials and Gen Z so that they can buy.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, he did turn it around, Mr. Speaker. 9 years is obviously too long for him because he's starting to attribute to the previous government words he said himself.
Yeah.
He was the one who said the federal government is not responsible for housing construction or affordability. That is after he doubled the cost. When I was housing minister, we built 89,000 apartments at an average rent of $973. Since then, the rent has doubled, the mortgage payment has doubled, the needed down payment has doubled. So with all this failure, why is he doubling down?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our Housing Accelerator program, our comprehensive plan to build more homes to make sure that Canadians can see themselves in home ownership once again is exactly what we are continuing to invest in. Yes, I pointed out that we cannot build homes alone, that we need partners in the provinces and municipalities. But I never denied that the federal government needs to continue to act on housing. That's why we've done that since 2017. That's why we're continuing to do it now. We need to make sure that young Canadians have opportunities their parents and grandparents have. That's what we're stepping up for. That's what he refuses to do.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Le Premier ministre a déjà...
The Prime Minister has already doubled the national debt, adding more to our debt than all previous Prime Ministers in our history combined, with the Bloc support, which has voted for $500 billion in budget allocations. The Leader of the Bloc has never voted against a single one. Today we learn that the Prime Minister will continue increasing our debt by $300 billion. This will increase interest rates on mortgages by how much? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we know very well that the plan from the opposition leader is austerity and cuts in services that Canadians need. But on this side of the House, we recognize that Canada is in one of the best fiscal positions in the G7 and the entire world. We have the lowest deficit in the G7. We have the best debt to GDP ratio. And we have the third largest AAA credit rating economy in the world. We are there to invest responsibly because a confident country invests in its people and in its future.
Then I have
The Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's decision with the support of the Bloc to double the national debt means that we are paying $54.1 billion on interest alone on the debt. That is more than we spend on health care. It's the total of GST. So every time Canadians buy something, the GST simply pays rich bankers. Why is he wasting our money on rich bankers instead of on services to Canadians? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, the waste that the Conservatives accuse us of is wasting our money on child care centres, on more child care spaces. They accuse us of wasting money on dental care. They accuse us of wasting money on investments in Northvolt, Volkswagen, Stellantis, and Honda to ensure there are careers for generations to come in a greener economy. They accuse us of wasting money by investing in seniors to protect their old age security. They accuse us of wasting because they just want austerity and cuts, but Mr. Speaker, we will continue to invest responsibly in Canadians. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, families are already living in austerity. The government is living in abundance. People are poor. The government is rich. The more the government spends, the more things are expensive. For example, interest rates are high, and spending and loans from the government are making things go higher. The Department of Finance's public servants, have they told the Prime Minister how much this will increase interest rates on families' mortgages by borrowing another $300 billion? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we know very well that Canadians are facing an affordability crisis. That is why we are there with solutions for them. We've reduced the cost of daycare by half throughout the country. Aside from Quebec, where we've invested in more childcare spaces, we're there to invest in dental care for the most vulnerable seniors, for youth as well last year. We're there to invest in our students, in jobs for the future. We are there to invest in Canadians. The Leader of the Opposition is proposing cuts and austerity in his ideological approach. The Honourable Member for Dorval-Lachine-LaSalle. Mr. Speaker, since 2015, our government has been committed to promoting shared Canadian values, diversity, respect, and equality among all Canadians. We all learned last week that the Leader of the Opposition visited an encampment. I'm just going to interrupt the Honourable Member. I hope she will have a question that relates to the government administration. She has 15 seconds left, but I hope she will get to the heart of the matter. Can the Prime Minister tell this House how the government will protect Canadians from extremist groups and what responsibility all political leaders have? Thank you. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. All governments are responsible for protecting the well-being of all Canadians, including Canadians in minority situations, groups who are mistreated, or groups who are typically ignored by the majority. We are there to invest and to protect those people. When someone who puts himself forward to be the next Prime Minister of Canada continues to court extremist groups, white nationalist groups, he should at least explain himself to Canadians. Why is he courting those people or condemn them? The Leader of the Opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister is not worth the cost of debt interest. He doubled our national debt, adding more debt than all previous Prime Ministers combined. And now we learn in his new budget bill that he's going to seek another $300 billion of debt, money that he will borrow out of the economy. That's equal to over 10% of our GDP, which will surely put upward pressure on interest rates. How much will all this government binge borrowing add to the mortgage payment of the average family?
Hear, hear. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, allow me once again to set the facts straight. Canada has one of the strongest fiscal positions of any country in the world. Certainly the lowest deficit in the G7, the best debt to GDP ratio in the G7, and it's continuing to decrease. And we are the third largest economy in the world with a AAA credit rating, the top credit rating by the agencies that look at fiscal sustainability of governments. All that is on the backdrop of further investments. We're making generational investments to support Canadians, contrast with the ideology of the Conservatives, which is to leave Canadians to fend for themselves, cuts and austerity.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, we actually have the highest mortgage debt of any country in the G7, and by far higher as a share of our economy than the Americans had during the mortgage meltdown. Now interest rates are higher and families risk losing their homes. Government deficits push inflation and interest rates higher. That makes the problem worse. So once again, how much will $300 billion of yet more debt add in mortgage payments for the average Canadian family? How much?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is mixing different factors that are facing Canadians. Mortgages are high for Canadian families, and therefore the Canadian government is choosing to invest in measures that are going to support Canadian families. I talked to a family from Burlington who actually saw their mortgage mortgage payments go up because of the rise in global interest rates, while at the same time as because their child care fees were cut by larger amounts because of investments this government made. We're going to continue to be there for Canadians while the Conservative leader wants cut.
The honourable member from Calgary Skyview.
Mr. Speaker, the government has a responsibility.
Oops. Okay.
I apologize to the Leader of the Opposition. I miscounted in terms of the questions that we're keeping track. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, inflation and higher interest rates, the costs Canadians pay for the spending that the Prime Minister told them was free. It's not free. Nothing is free. Every dollar he spends comes out of the pockets of Canadians directly through taxes or indirectly through inflation and interest rates. Now he wants to do another $300 billion of binge borrowing. Will he put aside that radical scheme and instead accept my common sense plan to fix the budget with a dollar-for-dollar law so we can bring down interest rates and inflation for Canadians?
Here. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have been there to invest for Canadians responsibly. We still have one of the top AAA-rated economies in the world. Our fiscal plan is sustainable and responsible. However, the Conservative leader still wants to make cuts to programs, cuts to our military, cuts to the initiatives that are helping Canadians across the country. The things that we are doing are helping Canadians grow for the future in a responsible way, and that's why we're seeing inflation come down and interest rates will be coming down, I am sure, in the coming months.
Now it is time to the Honourable Member from Calgary Skyview.
Mr. Speaker, the government has a responsibility to tackle misinformation and disinformation in Canada. Furthermore, the government has a responsibility to tackle hate and discrimination across Canada. And it's shameful that the Leader of the Opposition posed for photos with extremists who push hateful rhetoric. Can the Prime Minister please tell the House how the government is taking these matters seriously?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians have every right to be worried about the opposition leader's refusal, including multiple times during this question period, refusal to condemn violent extremism. But they shouldn't be surprised. Over his 19 years in politics, he showed Canadians time and time again that he will do or say anything to get elected. That includes pandering to extremists one day and pretending to stand with the very vulnerable communities those extremist groups target the next. Not only is this reckless, this is a failure of leadership. Canadians deserve better. Canadian deserves leaders that will stand up for them every step of the way.
Colleagues, I indicated that I would just come back to an issue that came up in terms of a question earlier today that didn't deal with the administration or the business of the administration of government. I'd like to let I intervened on another question which I thought was going in that direction. There seems to have been a correction being made. I want to make it clear to colleagues that the chair and the chair occupants have been discussing this issue, and I think it's very important that all questions that are going to be asked in this House are asked that respect our regulations in our procedures, to making sure that questions are relevant to the business of the administration of government. I refer members to a decision that I'd made, that the chair made November 20th of last year, and of course there have been previous decisions made by previous speakers along the same lines.
Sure.